Hello, good afternoon. How are you? We're so glad to see you today. October is Breast Cancer Awareness Month in the U.S., and here on Marketers on a Mission, it's Breast Cancer Awareness Week. My guest today, Marissa Henley, is an author, a mother, a wife, several roles like we all have, and she's going to tell us her story. She was diagnosed with cancer the day before her 34th birthday. She had 3 children. We're going to talk all about it. Lots to share with you today. And she's written a book that is unbelievably practical and helpful. So we're going to talk about that as well. Hi, I'm Patricia Durgan, the Christian Message Coach, and this is Marketers on a Mission. We present marketing tutorials and interviews to help Christian writers and speakers take their message online. And this particular week, it's a special week where we're talking about breast cancer. Today is episode number 143 with guest author Marissa Henley. Hello, Marissa. How are you?
Hi, Patricia. I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. It's so wonderful to see you. You are the youngest guest I have had or will have. And that's not a distinction you're really crazy about having, is it?
No, not so much.
Tell us what life was like. You had 3 small children, married, lots of duties. Give us a picture of the day in the life of Marissa before the call.
Before the call. Well, yes, I was married. I still am. and 3 children at the time. My boys were 6 and 4, and my daughter was 18 months old. And I was doing a little bit of writing, but I was primarily a stay-at-home mom to those kids. My oldest was in 1st grade at a school where we go to school a couple days a week and homeschool part of the week. We still do that today. And so that was keeping me pretty busy.
And you had one wish, and it was related to your daughter, that you would be able to, you had a prayer that you asked the Lord if he would give you a gift that was related to your daughter. What was that?
Yeah, when the phone call came and the prognosis wasn't great and my daughter was so young, I just wanted to live long enough for my daughter to remember me. And I felt pretty certain my boys would, but I wasn't sure about her. And I specifically wanted to live at least 5 years. And I'd kind of done some mental calculations through the fog of shock that she would be starting 1st grade 5 years from that moment, a little bit into 1st grade. And I asked the Lord to let me be the one to hold her hand on her 1st day of school, to walk her into her classroom.
Yeah.
That has happened. That happened a few years ago. I've had some bonus years even beyond that. And I'm so thankful.
Let's talk about Diagnosis Day. What caused you to seek out medical help in the first place, Marissa?
Well, I actually found a lump in my breast, and it was one of those things. I found it in the shower. I happened to be showering in the afternoon because I had an early morning meeting for Bible study the next day. And once you find it, you go, how could I have missed this? How long has this been here? And I was an exhausted mom of 3 little ones. And so normally in the shower, I couldn't even keep track of if I'd done conditioner yet or not. I just was always so asleep. So I just thought, has this been there? And I just missed it anyway. And so went for some testing. At first they said it was benign, come back later. Thankfully, my gynecologist pressed for a biopsy. And so, as you said in your intro, it was the day before my 34th birthday when I got the phone call from the radiologist who'd done the biopsy. And he said, I'm sorry, Marissa, this is a tumor. It's not breast cancer. It's a cancer called angiosarcoma. And I had done a lot of Google searching since finding the lump. It was about 2 weeks from when I found the lump to when I got that phone call, and I had never heard of angiosarcoma. I had to ask him how to spell it. I was, trying to find paper and a pencil and write it down. And I was kind of quiet, I guess, on the other end of the phone. You don't really know what to say, when they tell you this. And he said, Marissa, are you okay? And I said, well, I just don't know if you're telling me I have 1 year or 5 years or what. And he said, well, we just don't know yet. And that was the hard reality of those first few days, is that we just didn't know. But when I typed it into Google after I hung up the phone with him, I read that the 5-year survival rate is about 30%. And so that was when that prayer started. Lord, please let me live 5 years. Let me walk my daughter into first grade, and let me live long enough to make those memories with her that she'll have.
And at this point, are you cancer free? Do you?
I am. Everything is great. I went through, so that was 2010. And I went through treatment from October of 2010 through July of 2011. And at that point, I had no evidence of disease. I went back very regularly and often for follow-up scans. I was treated at MD Anderson in Houston and had to go back there often. But I don't anymore. And I've had some scares along the way, but haven't had a recurrence. And I'm healthy. I feel great. And I'm just really thankful to be here.
What a good report. What a good report.
Yeah.
I've spoken, you're the third lady that I've spoken to this week on this breast cancer awareness journey.
Right.
And two of the three of you have said that you got a phone call. I don't understand that. Is that normal? That seems very cold and heartless.
You know, I think that it is normal when it comes to when you have a biopsy and it takes a couple of days. I know some ladies who have had an ultrasound or something where it was clear on the imaging while they were still in the office and they received the news in person. But I think when you've had a biopsy and they're waiting for the pathologist to read it and then getting back to you, if they call you and say, come into the office, you know what they're going to say. So in some ways, I think it is actually more kind for them to just go ahead and tell you. I knew that phone call was coming that day. I was on pins and needles. I had programmed the doctor's number into my phone so I would know, that it was them and not, some sort of spam call. So I knew that it was coming that day, and my friends and family were on alert. And when I called them, they all started showing up. So. Yeah.
Did Christ give you any sense in your spirit that this was going to be the road you were going to travel? He doesn't always. He doesn't have to, but sometimes he does.
Oh, Patricia, I'm so glad you asked that. He did. And, I didn't know what the outcome would be, but I can look back and see for years, really, how the Lord was preparing me. He was teaching me about the truth of his character and his promises. And then very specifically that fall, I was in Bible study fellowship and we were studying Isaiah. And the week of my biopsy, I went to Bible study on Tuesday. The biopsy was going to be on Friday, and I it was on my calendar. I knew that was coming. And the lesson was from Isaiah 7, where it is talking about do not fear, do not be in dread of them, these armies that were coming against the king that Isaiah goes to tell. And our teaching leader talked about how those of us who are secure in Christ, our eternal life is secure because of what he's done for us on the cross. We have nothing else to fear. And so we can face suffering without fear. And then it looks differently to the rest of the watching world, the way that we're dealing with our suffering. And she had me so on fire to suffer for the God's glory. I went home and I told my husband that night, I said, if this tumor isn't cancer, I'm going to be just a little bit disappointed because I am ready to put God's glory on display. And, it was probably a little naive. I had no idea how hard it was going to be. But I think the Lord was just so faithful to give me that even before I had the results, to show me that he would have a purpose in my suffering. And I was so thankful for that.
And we were going to talk about this later, but let's talk about it now. You mentioned later along in your book, I think even in the resources of, let's show the book.
There it is.
Loving your friend through cancer, moving beyond I'm sorry to meaningful support. You've got to get this book. Do you have cancer? Does a friend or a loved one have cancer? Does your church need this in your church library? This is a valuable resource, a guidebook to be a friend, a good quality Christian friend, how to go about doing that, what to expect from both the patient should expect from you and that you should expect from her, because it's different than we think, isn't it?
It is, yes.
And in the further back in the resources, I believe it is, you mentioned that one of our goals should be, and it's difficult, but only he can help us attain it, to glorify him in our suffering. And that seems so unfair to the trained ear, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Mm.
But I think it does. It helps us just to know that none of our suffering is wasted. And those moments that we go through, the Lord promises that he's going to use all things for our good in Romans 8:28, but we don't always see that on this side of heaven. And, my story has a happy ending that I'm here taking care of my kids today. And, it doesn't always go that way. And I think sometimes from an earthly perspective, we don't see any good. It's just hard and it's terrible and it ends in heartbreak. But to know that we can glorify God in our suffering, even if we don't see any other good come from it, I think just gives it some purpose. And it really did help me in those darkest days to know that God could be glorified, and it just gave it some purpose. Yeah.
Our entire relationship with him is about trust, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
This is another aspect of that trust.
Yes.
One we'd rather not learn, but he takes us all to a dark place, or he allows us to go to a dark place. It drives us to him, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm. It does. I definitely saw that. Just how it deepened my dependence on the Lord, and showed me my need for other people too, and for community. I was used to being the one to bring a casserole to someone else, not having someone else bring a casserole to me. So, I think when he shows us our weakness, it teaches us to depend on him, and to depend on him through the body of Christ, people around us who are his hands and feet during that time. So.
Let me check on Facebook and see if we have any questions or comments. But then I'd like to talk. Community is a big part of your book, isn't it?
It is, yes.
Tell us about it, please.
Well, I just have seen that so often when a friend is going through cancer or something else that's hard. I know for me, I've been the person who's dodged someone at the grocery store or in the church lobby because I don't know what to say, or I'm afraid that it's going to be awkward because I'm going to say the wrong thing. And so I think that it's really hard in those moments of suffering, those times of suffering, to be the community that God intends the body of Christ to be for each other. And so, but those are the moments that we really need our community the most. And so I think, let's bring those awkward moments and questions and all of that into the open, and let's talk about it, and let's talk about what people need, and let's give grace when we say the wrong thing and we make it awkward. Because I think, striving for that community is better than just avoiding those tough situations.
But we need leadership, don't we? We don't naturally do that.
Right. No, it's hard. I think especially in our culture, we definitely shy away from suffering. It scares us. It's not Instagram pretty. We don't, it's easier to just want to avoid it. I know I felt that way for sure. And, until you go through it, I feel like that's one thing that the Lord has given me through that experience, is just a different type of compassion for people who are suffering, because I just understand it better. But I think we can all learn to empathize and learn how to reach out and support and risk the awkwardness or saying the wrong thing. Once we understand that people really need us, and they need us to be the community for them.
Even if we make a mistake, they still need us.
Yes.
The heart's right.
Right. I think so. And, I knew when I was going through cancer, I knew I made things kind of awkward, and I knew that people didn't know what to say. And, I'd been on the other side of that. So I was sympathetic to that struggle. But I just appreciated that they were trying, that they were reaching out, even if they said something that was a little weird or off, or not how I would have said it. There's grace and forgiveness there for sure.
For most of us, this is uncharted territory, and it was for you as a patient as well, wasn't it?
It was, yeah. No one knows what to expect or how it's going to go, just even from day to day. You never know.
So you had treatment for 9 months of chemo and then 5 weeks of radiation, and you were completely spent in every way during those treatments and in between them, weren't you?
I really was. I had really high doses of chemo. The cancer that I had was really rare and really aggressive, and so the treatment was pretty extreme, honestly. So I would get chemo for about 5 days in a row, and that happened every 3 weeks, and it would completely wipe out my white blood cells, red blood cells, and my platelets. So I would be really sick for a week after chemo, and then I would have 1 week that I would feel a little more normal. So I did that for 7 rounds. So that went on for several months. And then I ended up needing to go on a clinical trial at MD Anderson because after 2 rounds, my platelets were just not having it. They were not doing well in an extreme way. Like, I didn't understand when my oncologist told me how low they were. Someone finally had to tell me, no, if you fall and hit your head today, you might bleed to death. Like, that's how low they were.
Wow.
And I still needed several more rounds of chemo at that point. And so that was what the clinical trial was. It was injections to help boost my platelets so I could keep getting the chemo. But that was really tough because it meant I had to be in Houston 2 out of every 3 weeks for several months. And I live about 600 miles from Houston in Northwest Arkansas. And that was really worse than the diagnosis itself, having to be away from my babies and from my husband, all of that time. But the Lord provided. I mean, if we had an extra hour here, I could just tell you story after story of all the ways that the Lord provided for us during that time. It was just amazing. We saw that when our need is extreme, His provision is extreme as well. And it was a really, really hard, but really, really beautiful time as well. So then I had 5 weeks of radiation after that, which also took place in Houston. Came home for a while, and we tried to get my platelets up high enough. They were still not doing well. They didn't do well for years, actually. Not as extreme as I might bleed to death if I fall, but they weren't normal for maybe 3 years. But anyway, we had to try to get them high enough for me to have surgery. And so the end of my treatment was a mastectomy, also at MD Anderson. So yeah, it was a long road.
You know MD Anderson a lot better than you wanted to, didn't you?
Oh, I do. If anyone has questions about MD Anderson or like, where's the closest Chick-fil-A or any of those questions, I'm your girl.
Okay. Duly noted.
Right. I called Houston my winter home. I just wintered in Houston in 2010 and 11. It was lovely. The weather was great.
Well, there's something there, isn't it?
Right.
You mentioned in your book so many practical helps, and we're going to talk about some of them. And there's so many. I mentioned before the program that I had to stop marking all of the places that I so enjoyed because they were so revealing and so helpful and so practical and just touched me deeply. But I was running out of highlighter pen. I had to just stop marking.
I might have to send you some more highlighters.
Really. Did I mention you need to get this book? You need to get this book. But I wanted to talk about, let's see if their financial. One of the things that you mentioned in the book is the great financial burden. This is out-of-pocket expenses, hotels, traveling here and there and yon, maybe apartments, maybe not. I mean, it's a tremendous undertaking to be a cancer patient in America, isn't it?
It really is. We were so fortunate at the time, our insurance, we had really low out-of-pocket expenses. But that's actually not the case for us anymore. A lot has changed since 2010 in the health insurance world, I think, for a lot of us. But yes, all of the extra expenses with childcare for me, with my kids being little, and for some people, it's time away from work or having to cut back or take a leave of absence for work. And sometimes you don't even realize the financial impact. I mean, you might be passed over for a promotion that year that you might have gotten if you hadn't needed to take so much time away from work, or if you would have been able to put in the extra time that you used to put in. Sometimes people's spouses are having to take time away from work. The transportation costs, there can be, lodging, and it's just, it just adds up. And with groceries, sometimes you're having to buy, more prepackaged things or convenience items because you're just not able to cook, or you're eating out more because of that, or because you're on the road. And I see this especially with families who have children with cancer. Often the financial impact is really significant because they often have to go to a children's hospital in another town or even another state. And so all that time on the road, gas money, lodging, food, all of that, it adds up really quickly. And it's just one more burden on top of everything else that's going on.
Speaking of which, we're talking about rest. We're talking about emotions. We're talking about relationships, one person to God, then person to person, man and wife, parent to child, adult patient child to parents. It must just seem never ending. And yet Christ helped you. He didn't take it away.
Right. Yes. I knew that the Lord was with me every moment of every day. And I've told people before that, I grew up in the church. I have known Christ from a really early age. And there are times that I would wonder, am I really with him? Do I just know all the right answers? And the moment that phone call came, there was no doubt that the Holy Spirit lived in me, because the words that were coming out of my mouth that were honoring the Lord and relying on his promises, like, that was not me. That was the Holy Spirit at work in me. And, I don't know that I would want to go through that again. I hope that I don't in this life, but I'm confident that he was with me, and that gives me confidence looking forward to an uncertain future, to know that he will be with me no matter what else comes. And that's a beautiful experience to have.
And what a witness to your children. There's a hard way to witness to them, but he chooses that path for us. And they're how old now? 12 and 10?
They are 14 and 12 and 9.
Oh,
Patricia, it's crazy. It's so crazy.
You must not sit around home in the evenings. You must be going like crazy.
No, not so much. Yeah, we're usually on the go. It's pretty busy, but it's so fun. I love it so much. I look at them every day and thank the Lord that I'm here and that I get to be their mom and take care of them and see them grow up. And it's just wonderful.
How delightful. In the second chapter, the very second chapter, you're talking about a phrase that I haven't heard before, but it was, when I saw it, it was just like, ding, 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 ding. This is absolutely right. A perfect description. Tell me about friend circles. What's the value of determining where you are in the friend circle related to a patient, cancer patient, or any patient?
Yeah. I think this is so important, because the first step in figuring out how to help our friend with cancer is to figure out what kinds of things we should offer to help with. And that is determined by the closeness of our relationship to the person. And I think because of social media, we tend to sometimes overestimate the closeness of our relationships, because we know what she had for breakfast yesterday. So we think that maybe we're one of her best friends, where we really might be more of an acquaintance. And so if we know what types of things we should be offering to help with, it kind of prevents some of the awkwardness of offering to do something that's a little too personal for the relationship. And then on the flip side of that, sometimes we think, well, I really don't know her very well. There's probably not anything that I can do to help. And so I want people who are in the outer circle that we'll talk about, who are acquaintances, to know they have a really important role to play in that support network too. And so in the book, I talk about an inner circle and a middle circle and an outer circle. And the inner circle are your best friends that you talk to and socialize with often, and they know just the more personal things about your life. They probably heard about your diagnosis directly from you, or maybe from one other friend, just one step removed, with a phone call or a text. And so inner circle friends, your responsibilities, I think of a little circle around the person with cancer and the inside of her home. And so things like laundry, cleaning the house, listening to her emotional struggles. When I was going through it, I had a lot of difficult emotions that I was wrestling through, and I needed to talk about that with my closest friends, and I needed them to be willing to listen and care for my heart. They helped care for my children because my children were so young. We really kept that to the inner circle, just people that they already knew really well. So those are like inner circle tasks. And then middle circle friends are people where you might socialize from time to time, but you don't necessarily go deep. It's not as personal of a friendship, but you do run into each other from time to time. Maybe you kind of have multiple levels of overlap, between your lives. And middle circle friends, I think of their responsibilities as being just outside the home. And so things like running errands, picking up prescriptions, doing yard work, taking the car to get serviced, transporting older kids to and from school, extracurricular activities, that kind of thing for middle circle friends. And then outer circle friends are all those people that you bump into from time to time, but not necessarily on purpose. Mm-hmm. So if I see you at the gym, but I didn't necessarily plan to meet you at the gym and work out together, then we're probably outer circle friend.
Yes. Yes.
And outer circle is so, so important. And I give the example in the book that we received meals for 8 months, 3 times a week for 8 months. And that's about 100 meals. And there's no way that my inner and middle circle, especially with all the other things that they were doing for me, could have brought me 100 meals. And so we needed our outer circle to be really good at bringing us food. And they did a tremendous job of that. And so I talk about the outer circle having 3 main responsibilities. Number 1 is to pray, which all the circles should be doing, but I think that's one area where the outer circle can really know they're making a difference. Yes. No matter where they live, how far you are from your friend, how often you can get over there with a pot roast, you can pray. So pray, and then communicate support in a way that doesn't need a response. So a card in the mail.
This is so important. Excuse me. This is just so important. Doesn't need a response.
Yes. And, because it's really overwhelming when you, here, let me finish my 3 for outer circle and I'll come back to that. Yes. Number 3 is bring food. So pray, communicate support, and bring food. So with the communicating support in a way that doesn't need a response, especially when I was first diagnosed, the outpouring of support, it was amazing, but it was also kind of overwhelming. I had so many text messages and emails and phone calls, and I wanted to respond to each one of them, but I really didn't have the time. I was going to a lot of doctor's appointments, trying to get my household in order to start treatment and all of that. So I loved it when someone would send me a text that started off with, "You don't have to write me back. Mm-hmm. But I just want you to know that I'm praying for you today, and, I'm in this with you, or I support you, or, you'll constantly be in our prayers," whatever you want to say. Just start with, "You don't have to write me back." Mm-hmm. And then putting a card in the mail no one writes back. When you get a card in the mail, you don't feel like you even need to. So, and it's such a tangible physical reminder that person is praying for you and cares about you, because they took the time to find paper and a pen and a stamp and your address and walk to the mailbox and all of those steps. And I still have all of the cards that I received when I was sick, and they're just so precious to me. And then commenting, if she leaves like a Facebook update or something like that, a Caring Bridge post, that you could leave a guest book message or a Facebook comment. And she might just go through and click like, on the comments, but she won't feel like she has to respond to that. So those are all really great ways to do that.
Did the Lord give you this idea for these 3 circles before, during, or after your treatment, or was it while you were writing the book? Because I'm telling you, that's just brilliant. It's so practical, and it can go across the universe. It's so practical.
Right. It came from a couple of places. It was after I was finished with treatment, and I read an article that was in the New York Times that was talking about it was kind of, I think the title might be something like "How to Not Be a Jerk" or something when somebody's going through something hard. It was a great article, but the idea is that the person who's going through the hard thing is in the middle, and that if you need to vent about how hard their situation is for you, that you vent to someone further out from the situation. So like if you are the friend, you're not venting to her husband or to her mom or sister, right? You're finding another friend who's not as close with her to vent to. And when you're talking inward in the circles, you're just communicating support. And so that kind of got me thinking about circles. And then there was a book, and unfortunately I do not know the title of it. I think it might be out of print anyway, but there was a book that my counselor actually recommended to me about friendship. And it was talking about having different baskets of friendships. Mm-hmm. And so anyway, those 2 things kind of morphed together in my brain, and just thinking through the different people who helped me and the ways that they helped me that felt just really appropriate and personal and right for the relationship. Just kind of thinking through that. That's how it came about.
I just, I just, I could talk a long time about how practical that is, and
Yeah.
Natural and so fitting and so proper. You're helping in a way that's appropriate to the relationship as well as the person you're helping. Not overstepping boundaries that shouldn't be pressed upon. And also what you mentioned, going back to the friendship, if you have something that you want to say that might have a negative connotation, take it to a more detached person in the circle. That's so helpful, because you mentioned, don't expect to a friend, don't expect the patient to comfort you. She's busy.
Right. and it's hard, because when our friends have cancer, it's so hard on us too, as the friend. And I get that. I've been the friend, I've been the family member, and I've struggled with that. I've been so sad about my changed friendship with my friend who's going through cancer. I've been scared for her future and for her family. And it's brought up baggage in my own life. And so I think it's important to acknowledge that for those of us who are the friends, it's also really hard, and there's struggles that we're having to deal with. But we do need to go to someone else other than our friend with cancer to talk about those things and to get the support that we need. I think it's okay to acknowledge we need support too.
Yes.
But we just need to get it from somewhere else, not from our friend with cancer.
Yes. And you mentioned also that relationships become one-sided, and it can't be any other way. This person is literally fighting for his or her life.
Yeah, and that was so hard for me, because I was in that stage of moms with little kids, and my friends and I, we all traded off. Like, oh, I've got a dentist appointment. Will you keep my kids? Okay. And now I'm going to get my hair done. Will you keep mine? And, we just all pitched in together and got it done. And all of a sudden, I was out. Like, I was not helping anyone, and everyone else was having to make all of these sacrifices to help me on top of their already busy schedule. And that was a hard adjustment for me. And I know it was a hard adjustment for my friends, because we needed all hands on deck. And all of a sudden, we didn't have that. So yeah, I really appreciated how my friends accepted that friendship was going to be one-sided. There were times when I was doing well and I really did want some normalcy, and I would want to hear what was going on with them, but I wasn't really keeping track of what was going on in their lives from an emotional perspective. I just didn't have the emotional energy to do that for a while.
And then after your treatment was over and you had a good answer, then you still were talking about it to certain people, and some were okay with that and some just didn't understand. Why are we still talking about this? How did you process that?
That really caught me off guard. I thought that I was processing what was happening to me as it was happening. And then when treatment ended, and all of a sudden I was still living with a really real fear of the cancer coming back, but I wasn't doing anything to prevent that, wasn't still doing something to fight the cancer. And at that point, when I wasn't so consumed with just being in survival mode in treatment, that's really when the emotional processing happened. I thought it had been happening. It hadn't. It really happened after. And so I did really need to talk about it. I needed to talk about what had happened. I needed to talk about what I was still afraid of. I had to talk about what I was still dealing with in my day-to-day life, and how everything had changed, and I wasn't sure that it was going to be the same again. And there are so many, we've touched on a lot of the great blessings of being a cancer survivor, for sure, but there's also a lot that's really hard about it. And I definitely had the sense that most of all of my close friends, and really most of my friends in all the circles, were really great supports to me through survivorship. But the level of support, it's just not the same. Everyone around you kind of goes, yay, you're done, and they move on to the next crisis, which you understand. Like, I didn't need meals anymore. I didn't need anyone to drive my kids to school, but I still needed the emotional support, because I was still really hurting in that way. And it would take years for healing to come when it came to just dealing with the fear and the trauma and the grief, really. Even though I had survived, it was complicated because at first I didn't call it grief. I would have even felt guilty to call it grief because I had a happy result. But there was a lot of loss there that I needed to grieve. So
that's a great point. Did you find that you had to give up your hopes for the future?
Yes, that was really hard. I think that was one of the biggest things that I lost, was kind of a naive sense of longevity that I just assumed, I would live to be in my 70s, 80s, or beyond. My grandmother is 95. She's still with us. Praise the Lord. We've got great genes in our family. And so that's how I thought my future would unfold. And then all of a sudden, I'm not confident that I'm going to make it to 40. And, it changes the way that you look at everything. It changes every aspect of your life. And, I think that even though my doctors have been very positive, they were very positive during my treatment. They have been very positive, especially once I got a few years out from the end of treatment without a recurrence. I think that I probably still have never gotten past the trauma of seeing that 5-year survival rate. And just feeling the impact of that reality in my life. You can't really rewind the clock and go back before that moment. But yeah, it's really different.
Let me check Facebook. I want to ask you about your husband in just one moment.
Okay.
If we have any questions or comments. You do not on my page. Let me check my profile. We have some people watching. They have not commented, so thank you for being here.
Hi, everybody.
And we pray that this conversation is helping you, whether you are whichever side of the equation that you're on. So your husband, was he in med school when you were diagnosed?
No, he was practicing. He had been practicing just for a couple of years at that point.
I truly, both of you had your own journey, your own path. He had to have been overwhelmed. He loved you. What am I going to do with the babies? And I've got a practice I'm running, and he's only 2 years out of graduating.
Right.
Did he have blowouts? Is he very low key? Did he draw upon his Christian relationship? How did he handle it, as best you can tell?
He was my rock. The Lord, and I know that was just the Lord sustaining him. He never mentioned how hard it was for him. He was just completely focused on me and on our kids. And looking back, I don't think I even realized at the time how hard it was on him. Because, as you said, he didn't have the option of working from home or taking significant time off. He had to keep going to work pretty much every day. He did come with me to Houston when I would have scans, obviously when I had surgery, things like that. But for the most part, we made the decision that he would stay at home and be with the kids, and other people would come with me to Houston for the chemo and all of that. And so, he was at home working really long, stressful hours, and then taking care of 3 little kids and worrying about his wife. And, I think he didn't probably let himself think a lot about the what ifs and what if it didn't end well and what that would look like for him. I think he was always just much more confident than I was, honestly, that I would survive and that we would be okay. That he was just so strong and just took such good care of us.
We never know how deep the love goes until we have such events in our lives, do we?
It's true. Like you say, in sickness and in health, we said that in our vows, but you just never expect, at age 34 to be walking through something like that. And so, and I know it's not the case for everyone that their spouse, handles it that way. And, I'm just so thankful that was our story. And that great man there.
Yes, you do. Yes, you do. And speaking of community, you say in your book that there have been people who have called you or contacted you after reading it and said, I'm going to have to stop reading this.
Mm.
It wasn't your story. It was how blessed you were with support and being loved and cherished and swaths of people available to help you. And they had a similar incident and little or no support from family or friends. And it hurt them so they had to stop. They had to stop reading.
Mm-hmm.
You can't fix that, but how do you feel that Christ wants you to go forward, if at all? Does he just want you to share your story? Does he want you to start a local, regional, or national movement? Have an online course to teach people how to be better friends when someone is experiencing something they know nothing about? What do you sense is your future, if anything, related to? Because you're not obligated unless he wants you to do it.
Right. Those are all really good ideas, by the way. I'm going to have to play this back and write those down. I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. I feel so fortunate to have had the opportunity to write this book and to have it published. And right now, what it's looking like is I say yes anytime someone gives me an opportunity to talk about this topic, because I think it's important to just spread the word, because I have seen over and over again that once you give people just some information about what to do, some practical advice, then they feel equipped to go and help their friend move toward the person who's suffering. Like, we just need a little bit of help to do that. People are willing. People want to reach out and help their friends. But we just need a little bit of direction and a little bit of guidance on how to do that. And so yeah, I will just keep writing and talking about this topic as long as the Lord gives me breath in whatever way he gives me the opportunity to do that. So.
And he'll let you know when and if it's time to move on to another topic.
Right. I wouldn't mind getting to talk about something other than cancer. But for now, this is the topic he's given me. So. Okay.
If you're just joining us, please go buy this book as soon as this program is over. This is Marissa Henley's Loving Your Friend Through Cancer, and it is goes across the board. If there's illness, if there's great pain. The subtitle is Moving Beyond I'm Sorry to Meaningful Support. Here are just a few practical ideas. There's 2 pages completely. I'm not going to read the pages to you. We're all adults. Provide childcare. Some of them are obvious. Drive children to school. Take kids along on fun outings. Now, this is my son-in-law. We have 2 daughters, both children's pastors, who are married to 2 men who are both youth pastors.
Oh,
and one of the sons-in-law has a chronic illness and has been hospitalized numerous times. One of the things that I learned from my daughter is she made sure that those children, they were small, and they'd go and spend hours or days in the hospital. And she didn't have a support system. She was just freshly moved from one state to another. So all the normal people were not in the picture.
Right.
And dug deep like your husband did. She would take care of her husband in the hospital all day long, come home, and take those babies to the park so they could have a somewhat normal experience of childhood.
Yeah. Wow.
I'm so impressed by her. So doing those things. It seems like such a small thing, but it's so very important to the recipient, isn't it?
It really is, because I really wasn't worried about anything more than I worried about my kids during that time. And I hated that I couldn't do fun things with them. And I remember one day, it was actually when I was home between treatments, and one of my friends invited us over to make and decorate gingerbread houses. And I used to just buy the kit, at Walmart that you just assemble with the little tube of stuff. I still do. What am I saying? I used to just buy the kit. I still just buy the kit. My friend actually makes the gingerbread and makes the houses, like the whole 9 yards. And he had us all over to her kitchen to make a mess in her house that then she cleaned up, and we just got to enjoy, and my kids had a blast. And I have pictures from that year of them doing something fun, to lead up to Christmas. So, and over again, when there was a field trip or something like that, my friends would make sure that my kids were able to go, and then they would take a picture of my kids having fun and they would send it to me. And, that would just really lift my spirits to get to see them smiling and having fun.
The enemy tells us if we don't have $1,000 to give, don't give anything. If we can't go and
Mm,
help somebody completely build their house over, then don't go and help for an hour and a half. That's just
mm,
ridiculous, isn't it?
mhm.
And it's straight from the pit.
Right, because we all, like, I think one thing that I've really seen with this is that it's not up to any one person to meet the needs of the person with cancer. Like, no one person's going to be able to do that. And so you're just one little piece, one thread in the tapestry that the Lord is weaving together to meet all of her needs. And so you just need to be obedient to go be your thread. Whether it's one meal, or it's one card in the mail, or it's one outing with her kids, whether it's going and helping her put up her Christmas decorations or take them back down in January, just whatever thread you are, just be your one thread, and then trust that the Lord is going to use that and he's going to take care of meeting all of her needs. So.
And this circles us back to community, doesn't it?
Yes. Yes, we all need each other.
Let me check Facebook one more time, Marissa.
Okay.
Let's see. Okay. We still have some people, and we will have people in the replay. If you're watching the replay, you have questions or you have comments, please do add them, even though the program is over. We are still here to serve you.
Yes.
Tell us about Cancer Manna. I love that phrase. What does that mean to you?
Yes, the Cancer Manna. So it's just the idea that just as God gave the Israelites what they needed for each day, and nothing more, nothing less, he didn't give them the manna they were going to need on Tuesday, on Monday when they went out to collect. It was just for that day. And this came from also just reading some articles having to do with this idea. Just that the Lord gives us what we need for each day, and he gives us what we need for what we're facing. And so there's a couple of different ways that I apply this. One is that, if I'm going through cancer and you, Patricia, are my friend, and you're kind of in my head, like imagining what it must be like to be me and how sad I must be and how hard it is. I mean, I think it's good to want to empathize. But we also have to keep in mind that our friend with cancer is getting the Cancer Manna. She is getting God's grace that she needs to endure it that day. And we, as the friend, are getting the friend manna, but we're not getting the Cancer Manna because we don't have cancer. So we need to live our life and know that God's giving us what we need for each day for what we're facing. And he's giving our friend what she needs for what she's facing. And then the other way that I've applied that in my life is as I look ahead to the future. And it's not as uncertain now as it felt early on. Obviously, it's still uncertain. I don't know what the Lord has for me tomorrow. But especially in those early days of survivorship where my future felt so uncertain, and it was a daily struggle for me to rely on the Lord and to trust the Lord and trust his faithfulness no matter what happened. But just to remember that, like right now today, the Lord is not giving me Cancer Manna because I do not have cancer. And if tomorrow I find out that I do have cancer, he will give me the Cancer Manna then. So I can trust him to give me what I need when I need it, but I can't get ahead of him. I can't run out ahead of him and think, what will we do? What will life be like? What will that feel like if I get that news? I just have to trust that he'll be there giving me what I need.
Mm-hmm. And you've lived that. He's proved himself over and over and over and over, hasn't he?
Mm-hmm. He has. And, I still struggle. I still struggle to trust him. I still worry. And it's just a continual needing to confess that and to give it to him and just say, okay, Lord, I believe, help my unbelief, and just continue to depend on him, even for the faith to trust him. So he's so good to keep teaching me that lesson.
Excuse me, I think we have a comment.
All right.
Let's go over there.
Okay. That was a fun sound.
Yes, it was. Candace Owen says, I've been watching the whole time, but for some reason can't comment on the live feed. I'm sorry, Candace.
Sorry, Candace.
Just wanted you to know how much I appreciate you both. Oh, my goodness.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you, Candace. We appreciate that very much, very much. Now let's say we're going to close out in just a few minutes. We've run long, but that's the way we're going to do it all week long, because this is not something you can skim over. This is why we're here, to go deep.
Right.
So let's say that I'm a cancer patient and I've survived and my 1-year anniversary is coming up, or I have a friend who is over her treatment, but her 1-year anniversary is coming up. There's something special about that period of that window of time, isn't there? Walk us through that, please.
You know, it's a weird time. I never know what to do with it, to be honest with you. I think it's also complicated by the fact that my anniversary of my diagnosis falls the day before my birthday. And so it feels like it should be a really celebratory time. And there's a sense in which it is, for sure. But it's also a sad time for me, because it's a time that all those memories come back. And it was in October, this time of year, every year as the leaves start to change. And one thing that always comes around each year is parent-teacher conferences at school. And I was actually on my way. I was about to leave my house for parent-teacher conferences when the phone call came with the diagnosis. I didn't make it to the conference. And so for the first few years, every year when it was time to sign up for parent-teacher conferences, I would start to feel anxious. And it wouldn't end until I showed up at the parent-teacher conferences. It was kind of like, okay, this year is not 2010. This year I made it to the conference. And for one of my close friends who ended up sitting in my bedroom with me when I was supposed to be at that conference, after I got the phone call, it was difficult for her too. And so I think especially for those close friends, as we're reliving those memories and those emotions come flooding back, it can be hard to know what to do with it. And so I think just being aware of it. I've had friends send me flowers before on my diagnosis anniversary, and that's been really meaningful, or, a card in the mail, or even just a text that says, I remember what today was, and I wonder, what is it like for you this year? Because there's some years that I have felt just joyful and wanting to celebrate the Lord's faithfulness. And there have been other years that I've felt sad. But that is part of my story and part of my family's story. And usually it's kind of a mix of both. It tends to be more joy and less sadness as the years go on.
Well, an idea crossed my mind as you were saying that, giving me that answer. I don't know if it's for you or for someone else who's going to be watching this. But I would suggest that you consider choosing another birthday. That may not fit you. It maybe it's for someone else. But I leave it with you to decide.
Yeah. I will say it's been really neat to see things that have happened many of the years, like on that anniversary, whether it's something that I've written that gets posted that day and I didn't know it was going to be that day. Just little things here and there, some big things, some little things that have happened. And I've seen in some ways the Lord really redeeming that day for me. And other dates too. I remember after treatment, we were actually able to take our kids to Disney World with my parents. And the first day that we went to the Magic Kingdom was the 1-year anniversary of when I had started chemo. And so I didn't even realize it till we were standing in line for the Dumbo ride. And I thought, wait a minute, this date, it's November 15th. And that was the date that I had started chemo. And, it wasn't planned that way, but just to see how the Lord knows these details and he cares about these details and about our hearts. And it's just neat to see what he does with those dates each year.
I think we have another comment. Let's check and see.
Okay.
Susan Cruz says, wonderful interview. Unable to comment on live feed too.
Oh no.
I'm so sorry. That's not the way it's supposed to be.
Well, people can ask their questions later. We'll check back and
yes,
I'll make sure I answer the comments if anybody has any questions.
Yes, absolutely. Please, if you have a comment or a question, we will be available. Let's see what else we want to talk about. And then the book, there's so many I didn't get a chance to tell about all of it. Let me just show it again.
You're so sweet.
You must get this book. Get it for your church library. Get it for the hospital. Do you work in a hospital? Do you work at an oncologist's office? Do you work at a what do they call it when you go to go do your mammogram? What's that special?
We just call it the breast center.
Get one, get a case.
Right.
breast cancer. What did you just say? Breast center. Your
Yeah, that's
breast
what ours was called.
center. Get this book. Okay. Thank you very much for being with us today, Marissa, and being willing to share your story, personal details that were, you've gone down this road before, you've had this conversation before, but it's the first time I'm hearing it. And it's quite touching, quite moving, and we honor your struggle, and thank you for sharing it with us today.
Well, thank you so much for letting me share with your listeners and watchers, and it's been a lot of fun. As fun as talking about cancer can be.
Well, when your next cancer book comes out, or your next book that is not about cancer, let us know, and we will be glad to have you again. It's been a pleasure.
Okay, I will. Thank you.
Thank you, viewers, also for being here. Whether you're watching the live or the replay and you have a question or a comment, I'm not sure what's going on with the live feed, but I do appreciate you being here. We both do. And we're available. So ask or comment. We'd be glad to respond. This has been Marketers on a Mission, episode number 143 with author Marissa Henley. Tomorrow, we have another guest who has battled breast cancer. And Friday, we do as well. Tomorrow, we'll be joining Judy Pearson Martins. She was diagnosed the day, I have written the wrong thing in here. That's okay. I know Judy's story. Judy was diagnosed with breast cancer, survived it, and went on to create a non-profit organization of cancer survivors, helping cancer survivors. Very interesting, three very practical ways. You will not want to miss tomorrow's program. And Friday, Twyla Belk is going to be here. And just a blessing. Both ladies are just a blessing. Let me check one more time. I think we have some more activity. I don't want to miss anybody live if we can capture them. No. Okay. All right. All right. We are closing out. Once again, thank you, Marissa Henley.
Thank you.
We'll be here tomorrow. I hope that you were blessed by this conversation. Send Marissa a note and let her know. See you tomorrow.